The city was alive with the hustle and bustle of art enthusiasts and collectors, all searching for the next great masterpiece to adorn their walls. In the heart of the city's most affluent district stood a gallery renowned for its exclusivity, its clients a curated mix of the rich and influential. This was the place Elijah had dreamed of entering ever since he first picked up a paintbrush as a child. For years, he had poured his soul into his art, capturing the vibrancy, struggles, and beauty of life in ways that felt raw and transcendent. Today was the day he would try to take his first step toward making that dream a reality. Elijah stood outside the gallery, his hands gripping the leather strap of his portfolio tightly. The glass doors reflected his nervous face back at him, a mix of determination and self-doubt. Dressed in his neatly pressed shirt and blazer, he had made sure to present himself as professionally as possible. His work, however, was the true star. Inside the portfolio were pieces that had taken years to perfect, paintings that told stories of resilience, unity, and hope, pieces that reflected the heart of his upbringing and culture. Taking a deep breath, Elijah pushed open the heavy doors. The faint chime of the doorbell echoed as he stepped into the pristine white space. Everything about the gallery exuded wealth and sophistication, from the gleaming marble floors to the strategically placed spotlights that highlighted the art hanging on the walls. Elijah's eyes quickly scanned the room, taking in the abstract pieces on display, some of which looked more like splashes of paint than deliberate works of art. Yet, he reminded himself, these pieces were valued at tens of thousands of dollars, perhaps more. Behind the polished wooden counter at the far end of the gallery stood Victor, the gallery owner. His tailored suit and slicked-back gray hair gave him an air of authority, though his sharp, calculating eyes suggested he was more concerned with profit than passion. Elijah approached cautiously, clearing his throat as he reached the counter. "Good afternoon," Elijah began, his voice steady, despite the lump forming in his throat. "My name is Elijah. I'm an artist, and I'd like to show you some of my work. I believe it could be a great fit for your gallery." Victor raised an eyebrow, barely looking up from the tablet in his hand. "We're not currently looking for new artists," he said flatly, his tone dismissive. "Please," Elijah pressed, opening his portfolio and placing it on the counter. "Just a moment of your time. I've worked hard on these pieces, and I think they'll resonate with your clientele." Victor let out a small sigh, setting the tablet down as if indulging a child. His manicured hand flipped through the first few pages of Elijah's portfolio with the speed of someone scanning a menu, not the painstaking work of an artist. The images of vibrant community murals, soulful portraits, and emotionally charged scenes of everyday life barely registered in his mind before he snapped the portfolio shut. "This isn't the kind of art we sell here," Victor said, his lips curling into a faint sneer. "Our clients expect sophistication, elegance. This," he gestured vaguely at the closed portfolio, "is a bit provincial, don't you think? Maybe try the flea market downtown. You might have better luck there." The words hit Elijah like a punch to the gut. For a moment, he stood frozen, unsure if he had heard correctly. The gallery owner's expression, a mix of pity and disdain, confirmed it. Elijah's face flushed with embarrassment, but he quickly gathered himself. He couldn't allow this man to see how deeply his words stung. "Thank you for your time," Elijah said quietly, his voice steady though his heart was pounding. He picked up his portfolio and turned to leave, each step feeling heavier than the last. As he reached the door, he heard Victor chuckle softly, perhaps at a private joke or at the audacity of someone like Elijah daring to step into his world. Outside, the cool air hit Elijah's face, mingling with the warmth of his frustration and hurt. He walked to a nearby bench, sitting down as he opened his portfolio. He stared at the paintings that had felt so full of life and meaning just moments ago. Were they really not good enough? Was he not good enough? But as the minutes passed, Elijah's self-doubt began to give way to something stronger, resolve. He thought about the countless hours he had spent perfecting his craft, the sacrifices he had made, and the people who believed in him, his family, his friends, his community. He thought about the stories his art told, stories that deserved to be seen and heard. "No," he whispered to himself, gripping the edge of his portfolio tightly. He's wrong. Elijah stood up, his determination renewed. He would prove Victor wrong, not through anger or confrontation, but through success. He would make his art so undeniable, so celebrated, that even someone like Victor would have no choice but to acknowledge its brilliance. And one day, he thought, he would walk into a gallery, not as a struggling artist begging for a chance, but as someone who owned the room. With that thought burning in his mind, Elijah walked away from the gallery, clutching his portfolio like a shield. He didn't know how or when, but he was certain of one thing: this wasn't the end of his story. It was just the beginning. After his disheartening encounter at the gallery, Elijah threw himself into his art with even greater intensity. While Victor's cruel words lingered in his mind, they did not deter him. Instead, they ignited a fire within him, pushing him to channel his frustration, pain, and determination into his work. He worked tirelessly in his small studio apartment, a cramped yet sacred space where every canvas became a battleground for his emotions. His brushes moved with urgency, sweeping bold colors across canvases, creating stories of struggle and triumph, joy and sorrow, unity and individuality. Elijah's paintings became richer, more intricate, and more profound. Each piece reflected the beauty and complexity of the human experience, drawing heavily from his own life and the vibrant community that shaped him. A mother braiding her daughter's hair, neighbors laughing on a porch, children playing in the streets surrounded by colorful murals, these moments of everyday life were captured with an authenticity that resonated deeply. He often stayed up until dawn, his apartment illuminated by the soft glow of his desk lamp as he worked tirelessly, his brushes stained with paint and his soul poured onto every canvas. Despite his passion, Elijah knew he needed to find an audience for his work. He started small, sharing his paintings on social media platforms. Initially, the response was lukewarm. His posts garnered a few likes and supportive comments from friends and family. But Elijah wasn't discouraged. He kept posting, refining his captions to share the stories behind each piece, hoping to connect with anyone who might stumble across his work. One day, everything changed. A well-known art collector and social media influencer, Veronica Steele, stumbled upon Elijah's page by sheer chance. She had been scrolling aimlessly late at night when one of his paintings caught her eye. It was a vibrant depiction of a young boy running through a rain-soaked street, his reflection shimmering in a puddle, the joy of childhood radiating from the canvas. Veronica was mesmerized by the raw emotion and depth of the piece. She clicked through his profile, each painting pulling her further into his world. Without hesitation, Veronica shared one of Elijah's works with her hundreds of thousands of followers, writing, "Stumbled upon the most breathtaking art tonight. This man's talent is otherworldly, his paintings tell stories that speak to the soul." Along with her post, she tagged Elijah's account, urging her followers to support him. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Elijah woke up the next morning to find his phone buzzing incessantly with notifications. His inbox was flooded with messages from art enthusiasts, collectors, and journalists. His follower count had skyrocketed overnight, and people from all over the world were praising his work. Comments poured in, calling his art breathtaking, transformative, and a voice for the voiceless. Among the messages was one that caught his attention. A prominent art critic had written, "Elijah's work is a rare combination of technical mastery and emotional resonance. It is a powerful reflection of community, identity, and resilience. This is the kind of art that changes the way we see the world." As days turned into weeks, Elijah's newfound fame grew. Wealthy buyers began lining up to purchase his paintings, often engaging in bidding wars over his pieces. Galleries that had once ignored him now reached out, eager to feature his work. Elijah, however, carefully chose his collaborations, ensuring that his art remained true to his vision and purpose. The pinnacle of his success came when one of his pieces, titled Reflections of Home, was put up for auction. The painting, a sprawling, colorful scene of a neighborhood block party, embodied the joy and unity of the community that had shaped him. Bidding started at $100,000 and quickly escalated as collectors vied for the masterpiece. By the end of the night, the painting sold for an astonishing $1.2 million, setting a record for an emerging artist. The room erupted in applause, but Elijah remained humble, quietly thanking the buyers and returning to his seat. Despite his success, Elijah couldn't forget Victor's mocking words and the humiliation he had felt that day at the gallery. While he didn't dwell on it, the memory served as a quiet motivator, a reminder of how far he had come. He thought about the thousands of other artists who might have been dismissed just as he had, and he resolved to use his platform to uplift others. Elijah's journey was not just about proving Victor wrong, it was about proving to himself and the world that art had the power to transcend boundaries, to connect people, and to inspire change. He had become a hidden champion, not through vengeance or anger, but through perseverance, passion, and an unshakable belief in the value of his work. And though the world now knew his name, Elijah knew his story was only just beginning. It had been months since Elijah had last stepped foot in the gallery, but the memory of that day was as vivid as ever. The humiliation, the dismissive sneer, and the condescending words still lingered in the back of his mind. However, those memories no longer brought him pain. Instead, they served as a reminder of how far he had come and how much he had grown. Elijah was no longer the struggling artist clutching a portfolio, desperate for validation. He was now a celebrated name in the art world, his work displayed in prestigious galleries, sold to high-profile collectors, and written about in glowing terms by critics. His journey had been one of transformation, and now it was time for him to face the place where it all began. This time, Elijah wasn't walking into the gallery alone. Dressed in a tailored navy suit that exuded quiet confidence, he was accompanied by his agent, Karen, and a sharp-eyed business associate, Marcus. As they approached the glass doors of the gallery, Elijah paused for a moment, taking in the sight of the place that had once rejected him. Karen, sensing his hesitation, placed a reassuring hand on his arm. "Ready?" she asked with a knowing smile. Elijah nodded, a faint smile curling his lips. "More than ready," he said, pushing the doors open. The familiar chime of the doorbell greeted them as they stepped inside. The gallery looked just as he remembered it, gleaming white walls, perfectly polished floors, and strategically placed spotlights highlighting the artwork. But this time, Elijah didn't feel out of place. He didn't feel small or unwelcome. Instead, he felt a sense of calm authority, as though he owned the room simply by being there. Behind the counter stood Victor, the gallery owner. His tailored suit and perfectly coiffed hair were the same, but his demeanor seemed slightly different. Perhaps it was the pressure of maintaining his reputation in a competitive market, or maybe he had simply grown older, but there was a faint weariness in his sharp features. When Victor noticed Elijah and his companions, his expression immediately brightened. He straightened his posture and approached them with the practiced charm of a seasoned salesman. "Good afternoon, and welcome to our gallery," Victor said smoothly, his eyes flicking over Elijah's attire and the company he kept. His tone was warm, almost obsequious, as he added, "It's always a pleasure to have discerning clients visit us. Please, take your time and let me know if anything catches your eye." Elijah suppressed a chuckle. It was clear that Victor didn't recognize him. To Victor, he was just another wealthy patron, someone with the means to purchase the overpriced art on display. Elijah exchanged a glance with Karen, who raised an amused eyebrow but said nothing. "Thank you," Elijah replied, his tone polite but neutral. He began to walk through the gallery, his steps slow and deliberate. His eyes scanned the pieces on display, a mix of abstract works and minimalist sculptures, all priced exorbitantly. He noticed the same lack of soul in the collection that he had observed months ago, but this time, it didn't bother him. He wasn't here to seek approval or validation. He was here for something far greater. Victor hovered nearby, watching Elijah closely. "We have some remarkable pieces from up-and-coming artists," he said, gesturing to a large abstract painting splashed with muted colors. "This one, for example, has been very popular with our clients. It's a bold statement piece, wouldn't you agree?" Elijah stopped in front of the painting, tilting his head slightly as if appraising it. "It's interesting," he said carefully, his voice betraying neither approval nor criticism. "But I find that art should evoke something deeper. It should tell a story, create a connection. Don't you think?" Victor hesitated, his practiced smile faltering for a brief moment. Of course, he said quickly, recovering his composure. Art is about emotion and interpretation, after all. Elijah moved on, pausing occasionally to examine other pieces. Karen and Marcus followed a few steps behind, quietly observing the interaction. They could sense the tension building, though Victor remained oblivious to the true nature of the visit. To him, Elijah was just another potential buyer, albeit one with a discerning eye and a commanding presence. As Elijah reached the end of the gallery, he turned to face Victor, who had been trailing behind like a shadow. "You've built quite a collection here," Elijah said, his tone measured. "But I can't help but feel that something is missing." Victor's brow furrowed slightly. "Missing? What do you mean?" Elijah stepped closer, his gaze steady and unwavering. "Soul," he said simply. "Connection. Art that speaks to the human experience. That's what's missing." Victor blinked, clearly taken aback. Before he could respond, Elijah extended his hand. "Elijah," he said, introducing himself as though they were meeting for the first time. "You might remember me. I was here months ago, trying to show you my work. You told me it wasn't the kind of art you sell here and suggested I try the flea market." For a moment, Victor's face went blank as he struggled to place Elijah. Then, recognition dawned, and his expression shifted from confusion to shock. His eyes widened, and a faint flush of embarrassment crept up his neck. I didn't realize," he stammered, his polished demeanor cracking under the weight of the revelation. Elijah's lips curved into a faint smile, though there was no malice in it. "It's fine," he said calmly. "Rejection is a part of the journey. But I wanted to come back and thank you. Your words pushed me to work harder, to believe in myself even when others didn't. And now, here I am." Victor opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. He seemed frozen, caught between his pride and the realization that he had dismissed someone who had since become a celebrated name in the art world. Elijah let the silence linger for a moment before turning to Karen and Marcus. "I think we've seen enough," he said. "Let's talk about next steps." Karen nodded, her eyes gleaming with amusement, while Marcus smirked. As they walked toward the exit, Victor remained rooted to the spot, his mind racing. Elijah glanced back one last time, his gaze steady but free of animosity. This wasn't about revenge, it was about showing that success, when rooted in authenticity and passion, spoke louder than any insult ever could. Elijah walked out of the gallery with his head held high, leaving Victor to contemplate the weight of his own actions. The gallery hummed softly with the distant murmur of quiet conversations and the gentle click of polished shoes against marble floors. Elijah, now fully immersed in the moment, allowed himself to savor the subtle irony of being here again. He moved with the same calm confidence as a seasoned collector or investor, but this time, his purpose was clear. Karen and Marcus trailed behind him, both silently enjoying the unspoken drama that was unfolding. Elijah paused in front of a large abstract painting mounted prominently on one of the central walls. Its bold strokes of muted reds and blacks sprawled across the canvas, chaotic yet strangely static, as if the artist had tried and failed to capture emotion. It wasn't bad, Elijah thought, but it lacked the depth and heart he knew true art could convey. He tilted his head slightly, studying the piece as if trying to uncover something hidden beneath its surface. Victor, who had been hovering nearby like a hawk, seized the opportunity. "Ah, I see you've taken an interest in this one," he said, stepping forward with his practiced salesman's smile. "It's by a very promising artist, one of our rising stars. A bold statement piece, wouldn't you agree? It's already garnered attention from a few of our top clients." Elijah raised an eyebrow, amused by Victor's eagerness to sell. "Promising, you say?" he mused, folding his arms and stepping back slightly to take in the painting as a whole. "It's certainly bold, but does it inspire? Does it move anyone?" Victor hesitated, caught off guard by the question. "Well, inspiration is subjective, of course," he replied smoothly. But the artist's intent was to provoke thought, to challenge the viewer's perspective. Elijah turned to face him, his expression thoughtful. I see, he said, letting the words hang in the air for a moment. I can't deny that the piece has a certain energy, but it feels incomplete. This place has potential, but it lacks soul. Art should inspire. It should connect people, make them feel something real. Victor blinked, his polished facade faltering for the briefest moment. He recovered quickly, though, plastering on a wider smile. That's a very insightful observation, he said, his tone shifting to one of exaggerated respect. You clearly have an eye for art. Perhaps you'd like to take this piece home? It's priced at $75,000, a true bargain for a collector like yourself. Karen stifled a chuckle behind Elijah, while Marcus gave a faint snort of amusement. Elijah, however, remained composed. He studied Victor carefully, watching as the man's smile grew tighter, his posture more rigid. It was clear that Victor saw him only as a potential client, someone who could be wooed with flattery and prestige. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on Elijah. I appreciate the offer, Elijah said finally, his voice calm but firm. But I'm not here to buy a painting. Victor's brow furrowed slightly. Oh, he said, clearly puzzled. Then what brings you here, if I may ask? Elijah stepped closer, closing the gap between them. His voice lowered, not in anger, but in quiet authority. Do you remember me, Victor? He asked, his gaze steady. Victor's confusion deepened as he searched Elijah's face, trying to place him. I'm afraid I don't, he admitted after a moment. Have we met before? Elijah smiled faintly, though there was no malice in it. We have, he said. Months ago. I came into this gallery as a struggling artist, carrying a portfolio of my work. I was looking for an opportunity, a chance to share my art with the world. But you didn't even give it a second look. You dismissed me outright and suggested I try the flea market instead. The color drained from Victor's face as realization dawned. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. He stared at Elijah, his mind racing to reconcile the confident man standing before him with the hopeful artist he had so cruelly dismissed. Elijah let the silence stretch, giving Victor a moment to process the revelation. Then, with a calm and deliberate tone, he continued. You were wrong about my work, Victor. Very wrong. Since then, my art has been displayed in galleries around the world, written about in major publications, and sold for more than you can imagine. But I didn't come here today to boast or to hold a grudge. Victor's lips moved as if to speak, but Elijah held up a hand, silencing him gently. I came here because I see potential in this place. Despite how you treated me, I believe this gallery could be something more, a space that truly celebrates art in all its forms, a place that gives opportunities to those who might not otherwise get them. Victor's eyes widened, his expression a mix of shock, embarrassment, and something that looked almost like fear. What are you saying? He stammered. Elijah smiled, but this time, there was a hint of satisfaction in it. I'm saying I'm here to buy this gallery, he said simply. The words hit Victor like a thunderclap. He stood frozen, his mind struggling to process what he had just heard. Buy the gallery, he repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. That's right, Elijah said, his tone as steady as ever. I've already spoken with your landlord and reviewed the financials. Everything's in place. It's only a matter of finalizing the paperwork. Victor looked as though he might faint. His carefully constructed world was crumbling before his eyes, and the man he had once dismissed as insignificant was now standing in a position of undeniable power. For once, Victor had no words. Elijah, meanwhile, remained calm and composed. This isn't about revenge, Victor, he said, his voice softening. It's about creating something better. I'll be in touch about the next steps. With that, Elijah turned and walked away, Karen and Marcus falling into step beside him. The three of them left the gallery, the sound of Victor's stunned silence lingering in the air behind them. Outside, the sun was shining brightly, and Elijah couldn't help but feel a deep sense of fulfillment. This was more than a victory, it was a new beginning. It was a crisp morning when Elijah walked into the gallery, this time as its official owner. The purchase had gone through without a hitch, and though Victor had been hesitant at first, he ultimately accepted the reality of the situation. For the first time in his career, Victor was no longer in control of the space he had built, and the shift in power was palpable. But Elijah hadn't come to gloat or impose his authority. He had a vision for the gallery, and it was one rooted in inclusivity, creativity, and, most importantly, redemption. The gallery looked the same as it always had: pristine white walls, perfectly polished floors, and carefully curated lighting. But Elijah saw more than its polished surface. He saw the potential for transformation, for the space to become a beacon of opportunity rather than a monument to exclusivity. This wasn't just a business acquisition for him, it was a chance to change the narrative, not just for himself but for countless artists who had been overlooked or dismissed, just as he once had been. Victor was already there when Elijah arrived, standing awkwardly near the counter where he had once dismissed Elijah with barely a glance. His posture was less confident than usual, his shoulders slightly hunched as if weighed down by the enormity of the change. He looked up when Elijah entered, his expression a mixture of discomfort and curiosity. He still didn't know what to expect from this new chapter. Elijah approached him with an air of calm authority, but there was no malice in his eyes. "Good morning, Victor," he said, his voice warm but firm. "I imagine this is a bit of an adjustment for you." Victor cleared his throat, his hands fidgeting slightly. "It is," he admitted. "I wasn't sure if you'd want me to stay on, given everything that's happened." Elijah studied him for a moment, then gestured toward one of the paintings on the wall. "Victor, do you know why I decided to buy this gallery instead of starting my own?" Victor shook his head, unsure of what to say. "It's because this place represents more than just art," Elijah said. "It represents the barriers that so many artists face, barriers I want to break down. When I walked in here months ago, I wasn't just looking for a gallery to display my work. I was looking for someone to believe in me, someone who could see the value in what I had to offer. You didn't see it then, but I'm giving you the chance to see it now." Victor's brow furrowed, and he looked down at the floor. "I made a mistake," he said quietly. "I judged you without giving you a chance. I've been in this business for so long that I forgot what it's really about. I forgot that art isn't just about prestige or sales, it's about people." Elijah nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "I'm not here to punish you, Victor. I'm here to build something better. This gallery will be a place where diverse voices are celebrated, where artists from all walks of life can find a platform to share their stories. And I'd like you to be part of that, if you're willing to learn and grow." Victor's eyes widened in surprise. "You'd let me stay?" "I will," Elijah said. "But only if you're ready to embrace change. You've spent years running this gallery one way, but now it's time to try something new. I want you to work with these artists, to hear their stories, to understand the heart behind their work. You'll have to step out of your comfort zone, but I believe you can do it." For a moment, Victor was silent, grappling with the weight of Elijah's offer. Finally, he nodded. "I'll do it," he said. "I want to be better. I want to help." "Good," Elijah said, his smile widening. "Then let's get to work." Over the next several months, the gallery underwent a transformation unlike anything the neighborhood had ever seen. Elijah brought in artists from every background: painters, sculptors, photographers, and mixed-media creators whose work was as diverse as their experiences. The sterile, minimalist decor of the gallery was replaced with vibrant colors, dynamic layouts, and installations that invited interaction and engagement. The walls were no longer just a backdrop for art, they became part of the stories being told. Victor, true to his word, immersed himself in the process. At first, he struggled to let go of his old ways, but with Elijah's guidance, he began to see art through a new lens. He spent hours talking to the artists, learning about their journeys and the meaning behind their work. He found himself moved in ways he hadn't been in years, rediscovering the passion that had originally drawn him to the world of art. The gallery became more than just a business to him, it became a purpose. The grand reopening of the gallery was a night to remember. The space was packed with people from all walks of life, art enthusiasts, collectors, community members, and even artists who had never stepped foot in a gallery before. Elijah's own work was displayed prominently, alongside pieces from emerging talents who had been given their first real platform. The energy in the room was electric, a celebration of creativity and connection. Victor, dressed in a simple but elegant suit, was unrecognizable from the man he had been months ago. He moved through the crowd with a genuine smile, shaking hands and engaging in heartfelt conversations. At one point, he was seen helping a young artist adjust the placement of their painting on the wall, offering encouragement and advice with a sincerity that surprised even himself. Elijah stood near the entrance, watching it all unfold. He felt a deep sense of fulfillment as he saw the gallery come alive with the spirit of inclusivity and inspiration he had envisioned. When Victor caught his eye from across the room, the older man gave him a nod of gratitude, and Elijah nodded back, a silent understanding passing between them. This wasn't just a victory for Elijah, it was a new beginning for everyone involved. He had turned rejection into opportunity, not just for himself, but for countless others who would follow in his footsteps. And as he looked around the room, filled with art and life, he knew that this was only the start of something truly extraordinary.